One, thank you all.
Glenn,
What?
1 second. Does somebody have a phone on and their computer? Because there's a feedback loop.
Yeah.
There it goes.
Now I don't hear it.
Okay, went away. Thank you.
Oh,
No, still there.
maybe it's you, Chris.
Okay, now try.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you all. And we really appreciated the review we got. We took all of that to heart and appreciated, what you were asking of us to look into. And so we did that and spent a good bit of time rethinking language, rethinking the organization, and talking through with Kate and others how the sausage was made, right? So that there was a better understanding of what some of those maps were trying to convey, as well as remaining clear as a consultant team about, what we were asked to do from the beginning of the project and being able to deliver a document that would serve multiple purposes for, you all, for the county as they're reviewing land use plans, for others to be able to understand the green print plan and its values and strategies. So anyway, I'm here to introduce Lindsay and Emily are the ones that really are that are the experts in this. So I'm going to let them take over and share with you how we responded to your comments, and I'll go on mute.
If I may just add in on behalf of the Land Trust as a consultant, as a contractor for the Rural and Critical Lands Program, just to frame this conversation. First of all, to the board members, thank y'all so much for making additional time available this month to review the green print. You all know and recognize that this is an important planning document that members of your board have seen in some form. And you all have spent time participating in webinars and meetings leading up to this point. But you all are the first group to see this new green print, literally hot off the press a few minutes ago. So we appreciate your extra time that you are sharing with us today. And this is the beginning of your homework assignment for next week's regularly scheduled Rural and Critical Lands Board meeting. So I hope you can take the information from today and take advantage of the consultant resources and the county staff. And to the extent any of us can be helpful as you complete your homework assignment, our objective today is to introduce you to the consultants, to share the information so that you come to the meeting next Thursday feeling educated and equipped to discuss the green print. No action will be taken today. And this meeting's also being recorded if you want to go back and review again. So first and foremost, thank you. Thank you, Glenn, for the introduction and for allowing me to jump in and just kind of set the stage for today's discussion. We really appreciate it.
Great. This is Lindsay with Design Workshop. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen if that's okay, and just pull up the document so we can walk through it. Okay. All right. Can you all see my screen?
Oh, I can't.
You can't? Okay. Let's see.
It's coming up. It's saying it's starting to share content, but I don't see anything yet.
Okay.
Now I can see it.
So I can
Okay.
see.
Great. I just want to reiterate the thanks. We really appreciated the level of thought that went into the comments that we got back from those of you all who were able to review the first draft of the green print plan. So thank you again for spending the time to look through it and giving us some really good feedback. particularly on the overall sort of usability and organization of the document. We went through and addressed sort of comment by comment some of the specific suggestions that you all had, and then we also gave some thought and got some really good feedback from you all and others on how to reorganize the document to make it, again, a little bit more user-friendly. And we also heard your comment to flip it around a little bit so that the document more quickly moved into sort of the meat of what the mapping and the recommendations are for the document. So thank you again for the very thoughtful comments. We think that it has made a pretty big difference in making it a better document. So thank you. I'm just going to go through quickly to talk about some of the big picture organizational changes that we made, and then I'll pass it off to Emily to walk through some of the mapping updates and to answer any questions that you all might have about that.
Lindsay, can I interrupt you for a minute?
Yeah.
Sorry. I just want to make sure not everyone on the call has seen this yet. Is that right, Kate? Or has everyone seen it?
A subcommittee of this board reviewed your earlier draft. So this is the first time we've all seen this version.
Okay, but does it require a more general explanation about what we were tasked to do, what the green print plan is, like, or is everybody pretty well up to speed on that, and we can just talk about the modifications we have made since your initial review?
I think this body, as users of the green print, is familiar with what the green print is intended to do, and how it can be used best. They use it on a regular basis. But I would encourage you to just walk through the document to inform their understanding of this version. Not so much to review track changes from the previous, but just to tell us about this document.
Everyone go on mute.
Can you all hear me? Are other people hearing a loud beeping?
I hear that.
I'm having.
No, I'm trying. Walter, I think it's your computer. I can't unmute you, or I can't mute you. You need to mute your computer.
Hello? You talking to me?
Yes, can you please mute your computer, Walter?
Pardon me?
Can you please mute your computer?
Oh, okay. Where do I mute it at?
Okay. All right.
Okay. Great.
Sorry, all.
So Lindsay, take a little more time and just, present sort of the document, right?
Okay, great. So
Yeah.
I'll just linger on the table of contents page for a second. We basically sort of start with executive summary, background to the introduction to the project, some of the key takeaways from our public engagement process, which included meetings, webinars, and an online survey and an online story map. And then sort of key takeaways from that process and moving forward into the document. The way that the document is structured right now, we have it split into 3 primary sections. So chapter 1, the 2020 Green Print Plan, is where the priority maps live. And for the 2020 Green Print Plan, those priority land maps are broken up into the 5 sort of conservation themes of cultural landscapes, water quality, critical habitat, resiliency, and connectivity. those reflect some of the feedback that we got from the public and from the online survey. And this section of the document walks through the methodology that we used to identify potential priority conservation land within those 5 overall conservation themes. The next chapter of the document is the conservation toolkit. And so if the first chapter is where is the priority conservation land and how do we map that in Beaufort County, the second chapter looks a little bit more at what are some of the tools and the partnerships that can be used to conserve the land. That chapter is also informed by the online survey. We got some good feedback from the almost 1,000 residents who took the online survey, telling us what specific conservation tools they thought were the best fit for what types of conservation land. So it goes into a little bit more detail about what those tools are and how they might be used to work toward protection of the priority land identified in the first chapter. And the last chapter, as you all know, the development of the comprehensive plan update is going on at the same time as the update to the green print plan. So the third chapter looks at some opportunities to make connections between the 2 plans so that the environmental focus and the land conservation focus of the green print plan can inform the growth management and some of the longer range planning of the comprehensive plan. And then last, in chapter 4, we sort of go back and walk through the overall process and approach for the green print planning process, our public outreach, the public survey results, and a little bit of information about previous green print plans. Also new to this version of the document, since some of you all last saw it, we've added a glossary of terms to the back to define some of those terms and make it a little bit more accessible. And we also have some appendices in the back of the document, again, so that people can get a little bit more detail if they want about the prioritization model for the conservation land maps, a little bit more information about some of the recommendations that link the green print plan to the comprehensive plan, the full survey results, and a section on what it might look like if you were to do priority land mapping with a focus on creating passive recreation opportunities on public open space land in Beaufort County. I'm going to just keep moving on through, but just stop me if you have any questions or want me to slow down. So the first section, like I mentioned, is the executive summary. We pulled in some additional visuals for this section, and this is, again, just sort of a broad overview of the process, some of the key takeaways from public engagement, and the things that we heard to inform the plan. And then this page here, how to use this document, we have links within the document so that people can more easily jump around to the pieces that they're most interested in. And this basically walks through what we just walked through with the table of contents, that in chapter 1, you find how to look at and identify where the priority conservation land is in Beaufort County. Chapter 2 has a focus on how to protect that land, and chapter 3 has a focus on how the plan can inform other efforts. And underneath, you have the list of potential users so that people can see what sections they might be particularly interested in and the different ways that they might make use of the different sections of the plan. Throughout the document, we also have a link to, which was something else that you all requested, and a link to a interactive web map with all of the priority land maps available as individual layers that can be turned on and off. And people can zoom in and out and kind of pan around Beaufort County to look at the maps in greater detail. This link is correct, but those maps are going to take a little bit of time to publish. So we'll give you all a heads up when they're loaded there. But this, like I said, the link will remain the same. But in case anyone clicks on it and follows it and doesn't see anything, it's because it takes a little bit of time on the back end for those maps to get published online. But we'll let you all know when they're live.
That's great. Thank you. I did click on it and asked you to log in. So I'll be excited to see that in the future.
That's good to know too. Thanks for letting us know about the login. We'll be sure before we send it out again that that it's fully public. All right. And Emily, do you want to go through this next section? I can kind of move through page to page if you want to just tell me when to move forward.
Okay, sure. Well, actually, why don't you set the stage with the categories, and then I'll dive into the detail of the maps, if you don't mind.
Great. So this introductory page tries to sort of give people a little bit more context about traditionally the role of the Green Print Plan has been to use mapping to identify lands that should be targeted for conservation in Beaufort County. And so what's a little bit new about the 2020 Green Print Plan is the fact that we're using a new mapping methodology that's driven by the extensive data that's available for the county that we've gathered, and then also by public input about their priorities and what they see as being sort of the key elements of these different conservation values. And so we have a few notes here about the process. We have some links on this page too, again, to that online map, and also so people can jump forward and learn a little bit more about what that prioritization model is and how it led to the creation of the maps that are shown on the following pages. But basically, this is an introduction to the idea that the next few pages will kind of walk people through both some existing conditions information, sort of highlighting the current state of cultural landscapes, water quality, critical habitat resiliency, and connectivity in Beaufort County, and then leading into the priority land maps that are specific to each of those broad conservation themes. And Emily, I'll just move through. Yeah, just let me know when you want me to stop.
Okay, well, let's start with cultural landscapes. Actually, can you just go back 2 slides, please? Mm-hmm. One more, please.
Gotcha.
So as Lindsay noted, we have these 5 categories, which are the lenses that we're viewing the Green Print priority through. 4 of them are the ones that we have modified and moved forward with, and we moved open space connectivity. I'm sorry, that's not correct. We moved the passive park, which was the 6th one, to the appendix, and took that out of the overall priority mapping. So we conducted a long and deep gathering of all of the available GIS data and updated it to the greatest extent possible with publicly available GIS data to create what we call a layer cake analysis to layer on top of each other these high priority items that really stick to the mission of what the Green Print and the Rural and Critical Land Preservation Program is set out to do. So I'm just going to walk through each of the categories and give a little bit of insight into the data that went into those composite maps for each of the sections, and hopefully that will set the stage for what you're seeing on the map. So Lindsay, if you could go to the next slide, please. So starting with cultural landscapes, we again gathered the wealth of data that's available for the county with regards to cultural and historic landscapes. Through Beaufort County, we have the National Register of Historic Places, public and traditional places of water access, cultural districts, including the Commercial Fishing Village District, prime farmland, historic rice fields, historic canopy, which gets into some of the most mature trees in the county, historic cotton plantation, archaeological sites, heirs properties, rural character lands, which we use rural zoning as a definition for that, canopy roads, which again speaks to rural character, and working waterfronts. So the next slide, please. So when you put all those together, where you get the most overlap is where you get the highest priority with regards to cultural and historic landscapes. For all the maps, the resolution of the data is 30 feet by 30 feet. So it is very fine resolution. So it is by a square footage rather than parcels, the weighting. And so we get a high priority to low priority score for each 30 by 30 section of your county. We know that the legibility is a bit hard to see at the county scale at an 8.5 by 11 sheet. So that's why we've created this web map so you can zoom in and out. And then we've added on the left-hand side an enlargement. So you see Ladies Island here. So you can see an enlargement of how those scoring sort of play out. So every 30 by 30 foot section of the county has a score in all of these categories. And then we composited all of the scores for all the categories into one big map. But we think the usefulness is more in the individual categories. So this is also one thing that we changed in conversations with you all and with others, is that we went ahead and eliminated from the analysis all wetland areas because they are already regulated. And so we're really honing in on other land besides wetland areas in the analysis of the map. And then for each map, we have an overlay of already currently protected land, which is in the orange dashed shape that you'll see on all of the maps. We've noted some limitations. The quality of the data is the limitation, and that we feel like we have very good high quality, but and we've checked this with multiple stakeholders and experts in the county, but the analysis is only good as the data that goes into it. So there could be across the county things missed, and we're happy to hear about those if there are red flags, but nonetheless, we feel pretty confident. And then other sort of limitations are that archaeological sites and other sensitive cultural sites that aren't usually publicly advertised as to where they are, but are known, to the state and others. Those would also not be found on this map for the purposes of keeping those confidential if they exist. We don't even have them. And so those are just the couple limitations of the data that we have. Does anyone have any questions about the cultural and historical resources?
Yes, I have one. On these maps, the color that's most prominent is that lavender purple color, but I don't see that on the listed anywhere. What does that denote?
The lavender, I'm sorry, there's lavender in the legend and on the maps, and that is the lowest priority for cultural and historical resources. I'm not sure if I'm not.
It's at the very bottom of that rainbow-looking legend, right? You see it underneath green. You'll see the lavender there. It just so happens that lavender is the most used color on these maps, but each color on the legend is given an equal bandwidth.
Yeah, it looks like green's the lowest priority because of the way the spectrum is printed. The lavender, I guess, bleeds in to the green.
I don't know, Lindsay. Do you want to just? We can expand the length of the legend. I don't know if you want to just zoom into the legend, but we can make that more clear. We haven't changed any of the scorings per se, but we did change how the scorings are displayed. And so it's very easy for us to change this if it's not clear, but we can maybe lengthen the legend so that you can see that lavender.
Yeah, just stretch out the legend.
Scale. Okay,
yeah.
No problem. Any other questions? Okay, we can move on to the next category, please, Lindsay. The next category is water quality, and we had a lot of conversation with fine-tuning this, and we have changed it quite significantly from what it was. So originally, we had in here a composite for water quality that built upon the Port Royal Sound water quality model, and what we added originally, which we've since taken away, are immediately upstream drainage areas from regulated and prohibited shellfish areas and areas immediately adjacent to non-point source pollution, those that have permits to release point source pollution into the waterway. And so we've since taken those away and relied solely on the Port Royal Sound priority model. The downside of using only this model is that there are only 3 categories that we have at the moment. We're going to try to get more detailed information from them, but they only have 3 priorities for water quality, 1, 2, and 3. And so here you see in red priority 3, which are the highest priority areas for protection of water quality. After a lot of conversation, we just felt because every watershed and drainage area from the bottom of the county to the top of the county are very different and nuanced. And as you will see in your stormwater management plan draft, and that the strategies are very different depending on the characteristics and size and geometry and ecoregion of each of the watersheds. So we felt that we would just simplify this in talking to experts in the county to using the Port Royal Sound watershed model. The downside of that, in addition to only having the 3 categories, is it doesn't quite cover parts of the county that are outside of the watershed. And so this is something we'd love more feedback on from you in trying to simplify this. We just heard that what we had originally may have been too complex and not necessarily useful for water quality protection. So this is one major modification that we've made to the latest maps. Again, the Port Royal Sound watershed priority model was created by the Nature Conservancy. That model that they created is based on land cover data from the federal government. It did include land cover from 2016, I believe, or 2016. So that is the latest land cover data that exists out in the world. And so, as you can imagine, lots of things have changed potentially in the county from 2016, but that is the latest data we have. So that is a limitation of the data. They also excluded parcels less than 10 acres. And there was one other thing that I wanted to mention. Oh, and the resolution, instead of 30 feet by 30 feet, which is what we have for all the other data layers, the Nature Conservancy's data is 30 meters by 30 meters. So it's a little coarser, but it does get, I think there are some patterns that are pretty clear. And so we're open to sort of conversation on this, but this is the latest that we have based on feedback that we received. Okay. We can move to the next then, if there are no questions or comments. Critical habitat. Critical habitat is a composite of many, many great data layers that are out there in the world, ranging from the Audubon Society, the Nature Conservancy, Beaufort County, the state and their gap analysis, the South Atlantic Landscape Conservation Cooperative, the Department of Natural Resources, and the National Wetland Inventory. We worked really closely with Chris Marsh on developing this model for prioritizing certain types of habitat that are most unusual or rare or threatened in the county. And then in addition to the habitat type, ranking those by land cover type based on their degree of threat or unusualness. We also looked at data layers that include prioritizing slightly primary tidal creek buffers, maritime forests that are lower than 10 foot in elevation, mature freshwater wetlands, marsh islands, forested wetland buffers, and then some high integrity beach and dune plant communities, and on unaltered beach, and then habitat for rare, threatened, endangered species from the Department of Natural Resources, and then resilient biodiversity hotspots as defined by the South Atlantic Landscape Conservation Collaborative. So with that, there's a lot of data that went into finding where there's synergies and overlaps with these, the wealth of natural resources that you have in the county. And again, wetlands are were eventually taken out in this new version of the scoring for critical habitat. In addition to that, we have another layer that can be used in conjunction with this to look at the large parcels, which is the inset map that you see on the left, identifying large parcels and giving higher weight to parcels greater than 1,000 acres, and then sort of going down from there. So if you have these unusual or exemplary habitats that are also on large tracts of land or in large continuous areas, those were weighted more heavily than smaller areas. Does anybody have any questions about that?
This small map, the parcel analysis map, high priority, I see that Paris Island and the air station are listed as high priority. I was just wondering why that is.
So on the left map, that is simply a parcel size analysis map. And so that Paris Island is a single ownership and it's quite large. So that's why it's showing up as a high priority with regards to just parcel size. Lindsay, did you have an enlargement plan for here? It maybe makes sense if you all agree that instead of the parcel size map that's inset here, we do the enlargement of Ladies Island. If that's confusing, but it sounds like it may be. So again, just to highlight some of the limitations of the data, the data with the different habitat types that we received, that's the best data that's out there from the South Atlantic Landscape Conservation Collaborative and the South Carolina Gap Analysis and the Nature Conservancy. They all use 2011 land cover data. And so what we did is just wanted to add that we updated their model with 2016 land cover data. So it's not quite the 2020, but it is better than the original models that those groups put together back when they created their prioritization models. Okay, well, maybe we can move on to the next one. Lindsay, unless you want to pull up the Ladies Island enlargement plan. I don't know if you have it up for that category.
Yeah, I can pull that up.
I do think the enlargement plans are really helpful because if you imagine a county split up in 30 feet by 30 foot squares, you can't really see it on these small sheets. And so we do hope that the web map and the enlargement plans help with the usability of the document, then also sort of understand how the criteria are stacking up on each other. Lindsay, if it's taking too long, then we can just continue on. Oh, you got it.
Yeah, it's working on it. It's
Okay, well, let's just continue on with resiliency.
Okay.
So the resiliency character area is consists of a few data sources. So we use the floodplain, the 100-year and 500-year floodplain from Beaufort County, giving higher weight to the 100-year floodplain. We also looked at projected sea level rise from 1 to 3 feet, which coincides with other conversations happening in the county, even though we do have up to 5 feet from NOAA, but that isn't probably something you don't want to see on this map because there's not much land left once you do that. And so we weighted 1 foot higher than 3 foot, and then of course 2's in between. We also layered in marsh migration corridors from the Nature Conservancy, resilient and connected priority land from South Atlantic Landscape Conservation Collaborative, and then we added storm surge areas from 1 to 4 feet, and then weighted the 1 foot as the highest weighted storm surge area. And then we layer all those together, and that's where you get this composite map. This one, you don't see a whole lot of red. You see very small little red ribbons because the highest priority really, when you look at resiliency, are the wetlands, but there are still, if you look at Ladies Island, for example, you can see those small, very small red areas along the edges, some of those higher and drier, slightly higher and drier areas immediately adjacent to the wetland areas, freshwater and saltwater. So I just wanted to point that out, and that's why you're not seeing a whole lot of red, and that it would sort of be going to the wetland areas. Does anybody have any questions about this data? All right. I guess can you go back? I just like to state the limitations. Nothing's perfect. So the limitations with this, of course, are that some of these, particularly from NOAA, are based on models, which those data sets change over time. And so moving forward, I would recommend that you update this one particularly as the federal government and others update these different models. It's unclear to us in digging into the models whether or not they take into account king tides. As you all know, because of the South Atlantic Bight, you all are prone to high tides and large salt marshes more than others in the Southeast region. And so it's unclear to us if some of this data really takes into account the nuance of that aspect of your county. But I think looking at this as relative information from high to low, it seems to be reflecting, what we would assume to be great places for embedding resiliency for the overall county. Okay, connectivity. This one's a little easier, I think, you all. So what we did is we looked at the idea of the Green Print Plan, of course, is that we want to create a connected, and this goes for not just for social use, but an ecological health. A connected system is a healthy system. And so we wanted to layer in connectivity as its own section. So we looked at proximity to already protected lands, scenic byways and highways, canopy roads, greenways, blueways, and including regulated lands, and then even a nod towards proposed public trails that we know, or that we had data that were in the works. And so what we did was we created a model, next slide please, that ranges from giving highest weight to parcels that are within less than 100 feet of these already protected or significant landscapes. And then it goes down from there from 100 to 1,000 to 1,000 feet to a mile, from 1 mile to 5 miles, and then 5 miles plus. So again, the source of most connectivity in your county are your wetland systems, and so you're going to see a lot more oranges than reds, at least in large swaths, because the wetlands are the most connected pieces throughout the county. But nonetheless, this is what it looks like. And then if you zoom into Ladies Island, you can see a little bit more detail of how the colors play out. Okay, next category. Oh, and then that's it. And so we did remove the composite map. Is that, I guess, Lindsay, that was the final decision, and that most felt that from that section because most the feedback that we heard is that the usefulness and the usability of the document or the maps are in those through those individual lenses. We did, however, still put together a composite map where you have all of these high priority categories for each category equally weighted into a composite map. So you get this heat map, if you will, of where you might get overlapping benefit across the different green print categories, which some of them are in conflict with each other in that, you know, low areas are weighted higher in some categories and higher areas are weighted higher in other categories. But nonetheless, you know, any places where we had more overlap of these categories are going to draw attention. And then we also did another Ladies Island enlargement of that. We were in the county a couple of weeks ago and did ground truth some of these and working with the passive park land manager and with her understanding of the county, which is much more than ours, obviously, and just looking at a few parcels just to see how they played out from a score perspective. Of course, we didn't get to see every, we didn't look at every site across the county to ground truth this model. But from the areas that we did look at when we were down there a couple weeks ago, they did the areas that she identified also sort of rung true for the high priority. So again, we only looked at 4 sites across the county, which is not, you know, the greatest sample, but we were able to do some ground truthing of the model when we were there. Any questions about the composite or anything overall before Lindsay moves on to the next section? Okay, well, we added the detail of the models and the data sources and their weighting criteria in Appendix A. And so we did take that out of the body of the report and move it to the back. So for those that do want to do a deep dive, they can access that information in the appendix. So I'll turn it back to you, Lindsay.
Okay, great. I'll just sort of go real quickly through, if we're sort of pick up again where Emily left off with that final connectivity priority land map from that first chapter of the document. From there, it moves into the conservation toolkit chapter of the document. And so for those of you who looked at the previous version of this plan, you'll notice that things have moved around a little bit here. And so we start by talking about, of course, the importance of the rural and critical land preservation program within this larger conservation and open space landscape of Beaufort County. Have a link to that, to the external website for the rural and critical land program. And we have, again, a lot of information about not only the various conservation tools that are available to the county, to the rural and critical land program, and also to individuals and to private conservation organizations. But we also have here, we pulled in the survey results so that as you're sort of looking through these various tools, you have the descriptions of the tools. And these are pretty similar to the descriptions that people were given through the public engagement process before being directed to take the online survey. And at the bottom of the page, you have the results of the online survey where people gave, you can kind of see they actually gave a fair amount of thought to the broad categories of tools that can be used to either to protect land in Beaufort County and the different tools that they think are most appropriate depending on the type of land that's being targeted. So we have that information here as another helpful reference to go along with this broad land preservation toolkit. And we included some additional links here, not only to our own glossary of terms in the back of the document, but also to some external resources if people do want to learn a little bit more about some of these tools that we mentioned here, comparing fee title acquisition versus conservation easements, for example, and learning more about transfer of development rights or about conservation development. We have in this section too the prioritization model itself. The model that Emily built using Model Builder and ArcGIS Pro itself could be a tool particularly for the county and for municipalities and for conservation groups, if the tool could be made available so that when you get in and look at the way that the different data inputs were weighted, people could use the same model builder to make adjustments and to have this be sort of an adaptable tool that can be used to reflect different conservation priorities and to sort of to test different scenarios throughout the county. So the tool that was used to create those maps that we walked through is itself sort of another tool in the toolkit for land conservation efforts in the county and the region. And then we have a section about the most important regional open space partners for Beaufort County, both public and private. And again, we have sort of this section looking broadly at the importance of long-term stewardship of these protected lands and some observations again from our public engagement process and some takeaways and best practices, including from this report from the Nature Conservancy National Easement Study. And we have, again, a link to that full report from the document as well. And the last section, the crosswalk to the comprehensive plan. This section, we include the priority, the composite priority map that Emily talked about. And we also introduce sort of the potential for strong connections and the ways that the Greenprint Plan and the Comprehensive Plan can and should inform one another. We make a tie-in to drawing from the urban to rural planning transect that's used by both the county and the municipalities in Beaufort County, making a case for perhaps looking at that urban to rural planning transect through the lens of ecological and conservation values as well. And if you are able to sort of overlay those transects on top of each other, then the opportunities that creates for looking at zoning, at overlays, at ordinances, and at green stormwater infrastructure practices through this sort of intersection of the traditional planning transect along with the ecological transect, so that you have this focus, this balance between both the built and the natural environments. And Glenn, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about the way that the composite priority land map from the Greenprint Plan is being pulled into the Greenprint overlay for the comprehensive plan.
Sure, love to. So that's what's been one of the most interesting and awesome parts of this whole process, working on both sides of this, is that we've been able to really inform the comp plan from a natural resources perspective in ways that we've never quite experienced before, because we were able to get into it in depth and priority through this Greenprint Plan. And so what we've done is taken this priority modeling and simplified it a little bit so that we could determine conflicts potentially with existing zoning, and to make suggestions in the comp plan about thinking about different types of development standards depending upon the environment that a particular development or a particular piece of zone land was sitting in, right? So in a low priority environmental area, you would want to encourage as much as possible, right? As much density as possible to save critical land from being developed. Conversely, in the highest priority environmental areas, you would want to reduce development pressure, have standards that work with the natural environment, be much more conscious of BMPs and low impact development and so forth in those. And then there's some spaces in between that have a graduation of techniques to think about as you are, depending upon, if you're in those two. So it's really sort of shaped our growth management planning and shaped a different way of looking at the zoning map in recognizing that those two-dimensional colors aren't really telling the whole story, that there's really an underlying environmental condition that is important to the community to retain and protect that needs to be considered alongside these development proposals.
Great. Does anyone have any questions on that?
I was just thinking, Lindsay, that one of the benefits back to the green print plan by doing that is that it, while it's not necessarily purchasing land by thinking of development standards or restrictions within environmentally sensitive land, it is acting on behalf of the environment and creating that harmony between the two, which would benefit the environment overall.
Mm-hmm. Great. And looking at time, I mean, I'll just scroll real quickly through the rest of the document to orient you. But again, this final section just has some of the background on our process, the meetings that we held, the survey results, which are listed in their full form as an appendix at the end of the document. It makes up the bulk of the page count in the document. And we also just talk about the history of green print planning and the rural and critical land criteria. And again, have 2 pages of sort of the glossary of terms in the back that people can refer to, which is also linked to from different points of the document. And then it jumps into...
Lindsay tells me that was her favorite part to put together, was the glossary of terms.
That was the piece I dragged my feet on the longest.
Yeah, she just couldn't wait for somebody to make her do that.
It's important. Yeah, no, but it is good to have in there. And that's basically it. I don't know if we're right about at the end of time. I don't know if you all have any questions or want me to zoom back to another part for a closer look.
Very, very good report. Thank you for the explanation. That's extremely helpful. I like all the maps and the changes that you made. For shareability of this, I mean, I think it's a rather large document. I don't know how big in the size wise it is at the end of the day. I love the interactive maps and the links that you can click on. I'd love to be able to see those in the future. But with the with the survey results being the second half of the document, have you ever thought about making that just a separate link that somebody could click on and see those, instead of having it, 50% of the PDF and making it a larger file size?
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. They're not really adding on to the file size. That's mostly the beautiful images and maps that we have. But okay. I think the sheer page count makes that a good point. And so that is something that we could just link to rather than having all. Yeah, that's a lot of pages on the end of the document. So that's a good point.
It's up to you. If you feel like people want to see it, then that's fine. But otherwise, you could just make it available by a link.
Yeah.
I like that. I think that's.
I like it too. It makes it look a little less daunting, maybe, when you see the page count.
Okay. Well, we look forward to moving forward. We've really gotten a lot out of this process. Getting to know all of you and the support we've gotten through the mapping and the feedback we've gotten and the help from people like Chris Marsh and others, Kate, along the way has really, for us, I think, we believe we've created something really special here, and we're actually going to take this forward and try to win some awards with it. It's quite an amazing thing that you guys have there, and we're hoping that this can be an example for other places to consider. So it's been well worth all the effort for us anyway, and we're looking forward to getting it integrated into the comp plan and getting those two pieces of work adopted and put in motion.
Glenn, I just want to end in saying, this is Emily, that when these maps are uploaded to the interactive web app, we will send the link to you all so that you have it and you know when it's available. It looks like it's about 25% done at this point, but we'll let you know when they're up and ready, and we anticipate that will be done by the end of the week.
Great. Thank you, Emily and Lindsay and Glenn, for the presentation today. Thank you again to the board members for your time. Like I mentioned at the beginning, you all should have a link in your email or a link in the chat box or a file in your email to open this document and work through it over the next week. I took some notes during the conversation, which we can certainly circulate with the group. If you have any specific questions or feedback, please feel free to reach out to Amanda or me, and we can be a connector with the planning staff or the design workshop team, but look forward to this discussion at our normal February board meeting.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thank you all, and we'll see you next week at our regular meeting, okay?
Sounds good. Thanks. Have a good
All
night.
right. Have a good evening. Bye.